Storms don't ask for your permission. They just show up. One moment you're standing tall. The next, everything around you is crashing down. But here's the truth. When you're rooted in God, you may bend, but you will not break. There is a strength inside of you that chaos cannot touch, a peace within you that circumstances cannot steal. You were created not to crumble, but to stand. The winds may howl, the waters may rise, but the one who holds the universe, he holds you too. And when everything else is falling apart, you can still be unshakable. Psalm 62:6 says, "Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken." That's not just poetic language. That's a declaration. That's a battle cry. When David wrote those words, he wasn't sitting on a beach sipping peace. He was being hunted, betrayed, surrounded by enemies. Yet he still said, "I will not be shaken." How do you get that kind of faith, that kind of courage, that kind of fire that refuses to go out when the night gets darkest? You remember who your God is. You don't measure his power by your pain. You don't measure his faithfulness by your feelings. You anchor your soul to the one who never moves. Hebrews 12:27 tells us that everything that can be shaken will be shaken, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. That means God will allow certain things to fall away, so what's eternal in you can rise to the surface. You thought that shaking was punishment? It was actually a promotion. It was revealing what's real, what's solid, what's rooted in him. Think about Job, a man who lost everything, his children, his wealth, his health, one tragedy after another. His world fell apart. And yet in Job 1:21 he said, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." That's not weakness. That's unshakable strength. That's a man who knew the storm might rage, but the storm didn't have the final word. Some of you are standing in the rubble of what used to be. A relationship fell apart. A job was lost. A dream didn't come to pass. And you're wondering, how do I hold on when everything's falling apart? Let me remind you of Isaiah 43:2. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you." It doesn't say you'll avoid the water. It says you'll pass through. It doesn't say the fire won't come. It says you will not be burned. God never promised you a storm-free life, but he did promise that he would be with you in the storm. He promised that what was meant to break you would actually build you. You don't have to understand the storm to overcome it. You just have to know who your anchor is. Think about Paul in Acts 27. He was in a storm so violent that seasoned sailors were throwing cargo overboard. Everyone had given up hope. But Paul stood up and said in verse 22, "But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost." How could he say that with such confidence? Because verse 23 says, "Last night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me." That's it right there. That's the difference between collapse and courage. Knowing who you belong to, knowing who stands beside you. And when you know that, really know that, you can walk through fire and not flinch. You can stand in loss and still believe. You can weep and worship at the same time. Don't let the shaking shake your identity. You are not your struggle. You are not your loss. You are not your failure. You are who God says you are. Chosen, equipped, called, and more than a conqueror. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him." Not just the good days, not just the breakthroughs, all things. That includes the heartbreak, the confusion, the moments you don't understand. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it hurts. But don't confuse pain with defeat. Don't confuse delay with denial. God is still working. And while everything around you may be shaking, your purpose is not. Your calling is not. Your value is not. Your God is not. Stand firm. Stand tall. Stand in faith. Because you're not standing alone. The God who parted seas, the God who shut the mouths of lions, the God who raised Jesus from the dead, that same God lives in you. And because of that, you are unshakable.